All right, so we'll start reading in verse 1. Now it came to pass after the death of Saul, when David had returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and David had stayed 2 days in Ziklag. Okay, so after the death of Saul, when David had returned, again, from, because remember, he went to the Amalekites, destroyed them, and then he came back to Ziklag. So after 2 days of him returning to Ziklag, it says, on the third day, behold, it happened that a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. So it was, when he came to David, that he fell to the ground and prostrated himself. So when David sees this man coming, he's going to immediately think, okay, there's something happening, there's something going on. Okay, and he's coming from the war, so he knows that this is something related to the war. And David said to him, where have you come from? So he said to him, I have escaped from the camp of Israel. Okay. Then David said to him, how did the matter go? Please tell me. Because remember, David now knows there's a battle that's happening between the Philistines and between the Israelites. This is the battle that David was going to be a part of before he was sent back. So he wants to know the outcome of this battle. And he answered, the people have fled from the battle. Many of the people are fallen and dead, and Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead also. Okay, so he's giving some very dire news here to King David. So David said to the young man who told him, how do you know that Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead? Now, David is skeptical about who is this person. He wants to make sure that this is a legitimate person who was really at the battle, who's coming and telling him the truth, because there's a lot of people that have a motivation to lie about these kinds of things. Then the young man who told him said, as I happened by chance to be on Mount Gilboa, there was Saul leaning on his spear, and indeed the chariots and the horsemen followed hard after him. Okay, so he's recounting this, what he saw. It's saying, as by chance he happened to be on Mount Gilboa. So remember, Mount Gilboa is where the battle was. And he's saying, I saw Saul leaning on his spear, because remember, Saul had thrust the spear into himself. And indeed the chariots and the horsemen followed hard after him. So there was a battle all around. Now, when he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me. And I answered, here I am. And he said to me, who are you? So I answered him, I am an Amalekite. He said to me again, please stand over me and kill me, for anguish has come upon me, but my life still remains in me. So according to this man, who was an Amalekite, he's saying that Saul went and he asked this man to kill him after he was already, he thrust the spear into him. He wasn't dead already, but he's now asking for this man, this Amalekite, to come and kill him because he hasn't actually died yet. So I stood over him and killed him because I was sure that he could not live after he had fallen. And I took the crown that was on his head and the bracelet that was on his arm and have brought them here to my Lord. Okay, so according to this man, okay, he's saying that he's the one who killed Saul. Okay, so Saul was already thrust through the spear, but he's the one who killed him, and now he's taking, as proof that this is what happened, he's taking the crown that was on his head and the bracelet on his arm, which are unique to Saul, that cannot be fabricated, or so to prove that he actually saw Saul himself. Okay, so what do you guys think about this story?
Well, it's not right.
Why?
Because Saul killed himself. He didn't have someone kill him. He asked people to kill him.
Okay.
He asked his men to kill him. And he didn't. They didn't. He fell on the sword instead. So maybe the guy just looted his body and took his stuff. Because I remember they said that they took his body and they split it in multiple pieces and I forgot where they put it. They went all over the Philistine tribe. Right,
exactly. So that's exactly right. This Amalekite is lying to David. He's not telling the full story. Okay? Because if you read back in chapter 31 of 1 Samuel, you can read in verse 3. It says, the battle became fierce against Saul. The archers hit him, and he was severely wounded by the archers. So that was the first wound he was inflicted with, is the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, draw your sword and thrust me through with it. So he's speaking to who here? He's speaking to his armor-bearer. He's not speaking to an Amalekite. Lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and abuse me. So he's specifically saying, I don't want these uncircumcised people, I don't want these foreigners to be the ones that kill me. At least I want someone who is a Hebrew, someone who's the Israelites to kill me, rather than these uncircumcised. Okay? But his armor-bearer would not. for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell on it. Okay? And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. So that's the story of what happened in chapter 31, 1 Samuel 31. So what this man is saying is directly contradicting. Now, it is true that Saul was dead, and it was true that Jonathan was dead, like he was saying, and those are the actual crown and bracelet of Saul, but the Amalekite here is not even an Amalekite. Okay? So according to the church tradition, and actually according to the Jewish tradition, in their scriptures, this Amalekite was actually the son of Doeg the Edomite. You remember Doeg the Edomite? Who was he? When did we read about Doeg the Edomite?
When he killed all the priests in Nob?
Yes, he's the one who killed the priest in Nob, and he is the one who saw David where? When David was where? After he fled from Saul, he went somewhere, and Doeg the Edomite happened to be there and saw him, and then later reported it to Saul that he was there.
He saw him with the priest, the local priest, and his whole family being killed.
Yes, so the priest he went to go see is Ahimelech. Okay, Ahimelech went to go visit him, remember? That's when he was asking for bread and he got to eat the showbread. Okay, and it so happened that Doeg the Edomite was there, and then later on Saul found out that Ahimelech helped David, and he was slaughtered Ahimelech and his family and all the priests in the city of Nob. Okay, so this, according to Jewish tradition, this man was not even an Amalekite. Okay, actually, when you think about it, why would an Amalekite, who was a foreigner, who David just slaughtered the Amalekites, why would an Amalekite come and do this? Like, why would he come and bring this to David and present it to him and call him my Lord? Like, it doesn't make sense that this would be an Amalekite. Okay, so the Jewish tradition says that this is the son of Doeg the Edomite. Okay, the son of Doeg the Edomite. And the reason he's doing this is because he wants to gain favor with David. He wants to gain influence. If you notice, like all throughout, like all the people that realize and know and believe that King David is going to be the next king, they come to him and they want to curry his favor. Like they want to do things for him. They want to impress him. They want to do things that, and they say, remember me when you become the king. Okay, so here this man is like coming and he's saying essentially like, I killed Saul. And so, let me present this as proof that I killed him, expecting that David is now going to return and say, give him favor, give him something. Okay.
Why would he? Oh, go ahead.
That's probably the same question. Why would he then, as like the calling himself an Amalekite still?
Yeah, what does he have to gain in that? Like he just killed, like you said, he just killed the Amalekites. I mean, that should be. If David knew that Saul's camp was fighting, Saul's camp should have known that David was fighting the Amalekites. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's possible. I mean, I don't know the exact answer. It's possible that he wanted them to be like, for David to be thrown off, because if he knew that he was an Edomite, the Edomites and the Jews, they're kind of like, because you know where the Edomites come from? The Edomites came from Esau, okay? And the Jews came from Jacob. They were brothers, okay? So it's kind of like they were vying like to be like the people of God. Who's going to have the blessing, okay?
Does the Amalekites also come from Esau?
No. The Amalekites did not come from Esau.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know the exact answer, but I think that the dynamic is different if he knew that it was an Edomite.
Okay.
And actually, specifically the son of Doeg, because Doeg is now notorious for killing all of the priests. Okay, so if he came and say, "Oh, I'm Doeg the Edomite's son" or whatever, that wouldn't have gone over well. Okay, yeah.
I'm going over here either.
Yeah. Okay. We're in verse 11. Okay. Therefore David took hold of his own clothes and tore them, and so did all the men who were with him. Okay, so he's now, this is the first time that David gets news that Saul and Jonathan are dead. Okay? So here he finds out for the first time. He now has, that's why he asked these details, And so David, at least, he's convinced at this point that this person actually saw Saul dead, and of course he brought him the crown and the bracelet. And they mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan his son, for the people of the Lord and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Then David said to the young men who told him, "Where are you from?" And he answered, "I am the son of an alien, an Amalekite." Okay, so he's speaking again to this person. So David said to him, "How was it you were not afraid to put forth your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Even after Saul's death, David is faithful to Saul. Like, even after all this, even when, somebody else killed Saul, it wasn't David's own hand. David had endured so much from Saul, had run so much from Saul, had opportunities to kill Saul and chose not to, never commanded anyone to kill Saul. And David's understanding in his mind, if you remember when David was kind of talking about what his expectations were for Saul, is he said, well, either he's going to die in battle, or he's going to die by natural causes or something. But it's not going to be because of me. I'm not going to kill him, and I'm not going to command anyone to kill him. So here, this is exactly what happened. He died in battle. Okay, he died in battle. And he was already hit by archers, and he had his sword or his spear thrust it into himself. So he was already going to die. But this man, Amalekite, essentially said, and he asked me to kill him, and so I just kind of finished him off. I mean, he was going to die probably either way. I just finished him off. In David's mind, like, the fact that this man were to touch the Lord's anointed, to touch the king that had been anointed by God, was like an atrocity. It's something he can't tolerate, he can't bear. Okay, so now you're going to see, again, just as David had done before, anytime someone is coming to kill Saul, and we'll see even people who come and kill Saul's family, what happens to them? David, they come to David thinking they're doing him a favor, thinking that they're helping him in some way, but actually it's the exact opposite. He treats them and gives them consequences for what it is that they did. Then David called one of the young men and said, "Go near and execute him," and he struck him so that he died. Okay, so that to that extent, he went and killed this man who killed Saul. Again, if we think about it in ourselves, sometimes we're in situations where there are people that really we don't, that are kind of always like a thorn in our side. We don't want them, and we feel, we're not happy with their presence, and we can't do anything about it. But if we're really honest with ourselves, maybe what we really want to happen is for somebody else to remove them from the situation. Someone we wish wasn't there, we say, okay, well, I can't do anything myself to remove them. This is where they need to be. But I wish something bad were to happen to them. I wish someone else would come and would do something. They would be removed. They would get fired. They would, move to another city or whatever it is. Here, David, even though he had done absolutely everything right, and he never laid a finger on Saul, and all that happened was the natural consequences of what Saul did, David still did not tolerate that someone would do something to Saul. This is a man that's been trying to kill him all along. This is a man that David didn't trust. David is not a naive man, right? All the times that Saul came and told him, "Come back to me, David, I've wronged you, I'm going to not do this again," David never believed him. He knew that Saul was going to continue to do this. And even while he acknowledged the wickedness of Saul, he still acknowledged his position. And this is an important thing for us to understand, is the difference between a person and a position, right? We don't have to like people because of certain, their personality or whatever. But when it comes to a position, we honor and respect the position, okay? And this is very important because the authority that is given to someone with a certain position is God-given. God gives this authority. A good example of this is the government. A lot of us might not agree with the government. We might not agree with who's the president. We might not agree with the governor of Texas. We might not agree with our mayor. We might not agree with any of the hierarchy of government that exists at all. And even they might be immoral, okay? But God has given the government the authority, and he tells us that they will execute justice. And he didn't say that they would execute justice only when they are Christian, when it's a Christian government. He says they will execute justice simply because they have been ordained by God to be the government. A good example of this is in the Old Testament is King Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, King Nebuchadnezzar was a Babylonian king, and he was by no means did he believe in God, nor was he a moral man. And God used him and his desire for conquest to punish the Israelites. He's the one who came and he took, he attacked the Israelites and he brought them into exile. Okay, so in the Bible, in the Old Testament, God calls this king Nebuchadnezzar, he calls him my servant. Okay, he calls him my servant. How is it that he's my servant? Well, is he really a servant of God? He's only a servant of God in the sense that God is using him to carry out his plan, not that he's like actually believes in God or obeys God or anything like that. Okay? So this is important for us to understand, that we are called to obey the government even when the government is immoral. Even if people in places of power that are immoral or wicked or doing things, but in every way that they are commanding us not to do against the commandments of God, then we obey them. And I'll give you an example. I might have mentioned this before. Like in the Coptic church even, there have been in our history, there have been patriarchs that were heretics. Okay? Patriarchs that, for whatever reason or the other, they had the wrong faith and they tried to teach the wrong faith. And they're identified as being wrong. And today we label them as heretics. If at that time, where this happened, if there was a revolt in the church and the church said, you know what, we don't acknowledge this person as the Pope of the church, we're going to separate, and it would become like this big mess of, okay, people follow this Pope and we're going to make another Pope and there's going to be two churches and the Coptic church is going to split and all this stuff were going to happen. Things would be very different today because of that happening. But instead what happened is nobody revolted. People acknowledged that this was a wrong teaching. They didn't follow the teaching, but they still respected the position, the authority of the Pope and everything else. And so because of that, the church remained united. And after that Pope died, there came another Pope after him that was not a heretic, and everything was fine. So God calls us to obey the hierarchy for the sake of unity and peace. Sometimes we think that the answer is revolution, but many times revolution is actually backfires and doesn't actually produce what it is that we want. Here, David could have made a revolution. He had the opportunity to kill Saul, but he chose not to. And he said, I'm just going to wait, and God is going to take care of it on his own. And God is somehow going to make me the king, okay, on his own. So it's important for us to remember God is in the equation. It's not like just us versus them. God is the one who is fighting for us and protecting us. So David said to him, your blood is on your own head, for your mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed. Then David lamented with his lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan, his son. And he told them to teach the children of Judah the song of the bow. Indeed, it is written in the book of Asher. Okay, so David composes like a song, like a poem, okay, to reflect his sorrow over what's just happened, what he's just heard, the death of Saul and Jonathan. And it says, and this is not the only place in the Old Testament where you read about the book of Asher. The book of Asher literally means the scroll of the righteous. Okay, the scroll of the righteous. You guys can make like a second row if you want. So, yeah. So this book of Asher, okay, like I said, it literally means the scroll of the righteous, and it has many stories in it. We read about in other places. That's like the heroic exploits of Israel and Israelites and famous people in Israel. It doesn't exist today, so we have no record of it, but it's mentioned more than one time in the Old Testament. So essentially, King David took this song and he wrote it in this book so that people would remember it. So, and this is a poem. He says, the beauty of Israel is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Let the daughters of the Philistines, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. Okay, what is he saying here?
He's saying not to talk about the victory the Philistines just had over the Israelites.
And don't talk about it to who?
To the enemies.
Right, to the Philistines. Okay, so remember, Gath is a Philistine city. He's saying, tell it not in Gath. and also Ashkelon. Proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of Philistines rejoice. Essentially saying, don't go and share this. I mean, it's not like they didn't already know, but he's saying just don't go and speak this to the Philistines, because when they hear of it, they're going to rejoice and they're going to feel like they're victorious. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew nor rain upon you, nor fields of offerings, for the shield of the mighty is cast away there, the shield of Saul not anointed with oil. What is he saying? What is Gilboa?
It's where Saul died.
Right, it's the battlefield, right, where Saul died. So he's essentially cursing this mountain where Saul died. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. He actually praises Saul in this poem, this song. He's actually speaking about like the military conquest of Saul and Jonathan also. Saul and Jonathan were beloved and pleasant in their lives. I don't know how he can say this. How he can say that Saul is pleasant in his life. Like David is at like a level where like I can't really understand how he could to this level. Like instead of rejoicing that his enemy is dead, instead of rejoicing that he can finally become king after running and going, like he's living among the enemies of Israel because he can't even find a place in his homeland to live, and yet he's still like speaking about Saul in such a positive way, in a pleasant. He's remembering all the positive things about Saul and nothing negative. And in their death, they were not divided, meaning that Saul and Jonathan like were united in life and also united when they died because they died together. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet with luxury, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. Essentially, he's saying all the military conquests of Saul have provided like a prosperous economy in Israel. They've given the people all these things. He's like provided stability. He's provided a nation. Remember, Saul is the first time that the people of Israel are actually a nation. All the times before this with the judges, there have been judges kind of scattered around in different places in the country. They were like local leaders in the nation. Saul is the first time that there is a leader over the entire nation together. Okay, he really brought the entire nation together as one people. How the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan was slain in your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. You have been very pleasant to me. Your love to me was wonderful, surpassing the love of women. What does that mean? Surpassing the love of women.
Not what I think it means.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just a really good friend, I guess. I really don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what it means. But, I mean, like homosexual groups, they use this verse as, like, they're trying to demonstrate and show that there were people in the Bible that were homosexual, and they claim that Jonathan and David were homosexual. And they use this verse as evidence for that. So how do we understand this verse?
Could either mean like motherly love, like, or between a husband and a wife.
Mm-hmm. Brotherly love?
Motherly, like
motherly?
Right, because surpassing the love of women. So would that be like two types of love that he would get either from a mother, which is like a very high level of love? I don't know.
Okay, so you mean that the woman is referring to a mother, okay?
Or a spouse.
But the spouse, man, that's the problem. If he's referring to a spouse in that way, like the way that, like when you read it just kind of literally with our understanding of today, like you kind of think twice about it. Like, what is he really saying? Okay, which is why people use this verse like that.
I feel like it's like stronger than like a love between two people, like male and female. Like for example, your love for God is stronger than your love. You know what I'm saying? Like level of love. Okay.
And that is what it means. It's just the way that it's phrased. So keep in mind that in the Old Testament, when people were married, Okay, it wasn't like today where it's like, oh, you fall in love with someone and you really admire them and you have things in common and you respect each other and you have such a good relationship and then you get married, right? Like that's the ideal way that we talk about it today. That's not how it was back then. Like marriage was something for convenience. Marriage was something where it's like, okay, it makes sense to marry this person for the sake of these two families being together and money and economics and like there was all kinds of reasons to get married back then that had nothing to do with friendship. Okay, that had nothing to do with like today the reasons that people get married. Remember, people would pay dowries, women were seen as property, men would marry multiple women. Like there was no sense of like the relationship between a man and a woman in marriage had nothing to do with mutual respect and things in common and like the things that we look for today in a marriage. Okay, so here what he's saying essentially is that the bond between him and Jonathan was one that was based on true friendship and was based on like same values and the same sense of like oneness and unity, right? Which isn't necessarily what was found in a marriage relationship back then. So when he's saying surpassing the love of women, essentially meaning like his relationship with Jonathan was a deeper friendship than he had with any friendship in any of the spouses that he's had. Okay? So it had nothing to do with like a physical relationship. Okay? The way that we might read it when you say surpassing the love of women, that's not what it was talking about. Okay?
In the Hebrew, does it also sound like that?
It's a little different in Hebrew. When we learned it in the original Hebrew text, the two different loves are kind of different.
Different types of love.
Different types of love.
I guess it would be Greek, right?
No, this is in the Old Testament, so it's in Hebrew. The
Right.
Greek is the New Testament.
But
When the Septuagint, like when it was translated, the Old Testament, the Septuagint.
Yeah, so it depends on which version you read from. But the original text is Hebrew. Yeah. Okay, any other comments about this? How the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war perish. So he concludes this song lamenting and mourning the death of Saul. Okay? This is the end of chapter 1. Does anyone have any comments or questions about it so far?
I'll put a question. So, what's the difference between this and I remember asking you in a text that the Philistines wanted to kill Saul and Jonathan because they didn't like them. So, in terms of that, what's the difference between that and here where Saul, where my Saul told him, okay, man, I want you to kill me because, so that might, what's the difference between this and back in 1 Samuel where the Philistines wanted to kill Jonathan and Saul because they didn't like them.
So that didn't change. The Philistines wanted to kill Saul and Samuel throughout. This mourning is done by David. David is the one who's mourning when he finds out that the Philistine killed Saul. But the Philistines haven't changed anything. They wanted to kill Saul along.
Yeah, I understand that, but in other words, comparing Samuel to 1 Samuel when the Philistines killed Saul and Jonathan. Were they actually dead yet, or were they still alive?
No, at this point they're dead. That's why he's writing this poem.
I know, but in 1 Samuel, were they still alive, or were they dead already?
In 1 Samuel?
Yes.
Oh, most of 1 Samuel they were alive. This is the only in chapter 31 of 1 Samuel, which is the chapter right before this one. That's where they died. So they've only been dead for one chapter.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to chapter 2.
Keep getting more people.
It happened after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said to him, "Go up." David said, "Where shall I go up?" And he said, "To Hebron." Okay, so why is David asking the Lord this now?
Because Saul's dead.
And because Saul is dead, now what does David intend to do?
He's the king.
He now wants to take his throne. okay, which is what God had told him from the beginning. So, but notice that he doesn't go on his own. Like this man David, he's a very like patient man, okay, and he doesn't want to act hastily. He's not like driven by his emotion. Like someone who is so driven by his emotion, first of all, they would be like jumping up and down when Saul is dead, and they would just rush in and try to take control of everything immediately. Here's here like pausing and say, okay, well, God, is now the time that I should go, and what should I do, and where should I go? Like all these questions, like, you know, he's wanting to hear. The very opposite of Saul. Like Saul, either he did things without asking God, or he tried to ask God, and when God answered, he didn't obey him. Whereas David, he doesn't do anything unless he inquires of the Lord, and then he gets a response from God of what he should do.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it really quite makes sense, but so whenever the Amalekite, the supposed Amalekite, he said, "I killed Saul," David immediately, without missing a beat, hasn't killed. You know, there's no question in his mind. You know. So he's very, very decisive. But here, he's like, well, I don't know. I'm going to ask God, you know, like.
Because David is a man of principle. So if it had already been commanded by God that anyone who touches the anointed of the Lord is cursed and is an abomination, and there's consequences for this, David didn't need to ask God.
But
he
didn't actually. The Amalekite, he didn't actually kill him.
Well, according to David's understanding, he did. Because that's what he said. He came and said, I killed him.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, David doesn't know what he doesn't know. Like, he doesn't know that something else could have happened. So, in David's mind, this Amalekite came and he said, I killed Saul, and here's his crown and bracelet. Okay, then you're the one who killed him, and you deserve to die. So, like...
You don't think that's rash? Like, maybe he could have, like, waited a second to really see if it was true and maybe find out he wasn't, actually.
I mean, I'm not saying that there was necessarily a right or wrong thing to do, but I'm saying that in David's mind, he's always driven by a principle. For instance, when he was living in the land of the Philistines, and he decided to take this opportunity to go and attack the enemies of Israel, well, why did he do that? He did that only because that is a commandment of God. Like everything that David does is based on a principle, and if God has said something, then there's no reason to ask again. Like this is something that's been established, and because he's very principled, like he doesn't need to ask God again. Like honestly, like a lot of times we ask God things even though we really know what we should do, but we just kind of want to hear it again because we're really reluctant to do it. David's not like David. He knows what God has said. He knows God doesn't change. He knows exactly what to do in those situations. But in situations where, okay, well, should I go to Israel? Where should I go? Like those things have no clear answer to him, so he needs to get guidance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like it also add that David's men of war. So in a situation like that, you wouldn't send a messenger saying, "I've done this as a half truth." You wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So why specifically does he say, shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah? So remember, what is he referring to when he says Judah? What is Judah?
The southern kingdom.
Well, at this point, there is no northern and southern kingdoms. Okay, we're pre that. We're before that. Okay. So what when he says Judah, what is he referring to?
His tribe.
His tribe. So where is his tribe lives? Where in a certain area? Again, you can refer to this thing, right? So oh, it's here, yeah.
It's not like a...
Oh, it's not clickable. Okay. So remember, each of the tribes has an area. So it's his tribe. Why? So why is he asking? Why would he want to go to his tribe?
Because it's his tribe.
Get his men.
His people, right? Like who's because even though people know that he's been anointed as king, it's not just a simple matter of, okay, Saul is dead now. David walks into the palace or whatever and says, okay, here I am, and everyone's going to accept him. He has to establish support. He has to establish, like this is going to still be a gradual process for him. So the people that are the most likely to accept him initially are his own people, the people from Judah, okay? So he's asking God specifically, where from Judah should I go? And he says, Hebron, okay? And there was like a lot of advantages of the city Hebron, of why God would tell him to go there. First of all, it was a city of refuge.
So is he like talking directly to God now?
he could also still be using. So remember Abishai, the priest, was with him, and he had the ephod, and so all of this could be using the Urim and the Thummim. Okay, so Shnuda, for those who are not here, so the question is, how did these people in the Old Testament talk to God, and how does God answer them? Does He just kind of speak with words? So one of the ways that that God spoke to people is essentially by giving yes, no answers to questions. And the ephod of the priest had these two things on them. One is called the Urim and one is called the Thummim. And whenever people would ask a question, God would use them to kind of indicate yes or no. Okay, so people could ask God yes, no questions, and He would respond. And so they could narrow down essentially, like, should I go to Hebron? And yes or no, So, but usually, like there's a few places where it explicitly speaks about the Urim and the Thummim, but a lot of times it doesn't go into that detail, and it just says like a dialogue like this. Okay, this doesn't mean that there was a voice coming from heaven and then David heard it. Okay, that's not necessarily what this means.
But David was a prophet, wasn't he? I'm sorry. David was a prophet, though, right? So he could hear God's voice, right? That was his role, right?
Well, David was a prophet, but the way that David prophesied was through his writings. Okay, so for instance, we call David a prophet because of the Psalms. The Psalms that he wrote had prophetic things about the Messiah in them. But that doesn't mean that as David was writing the Psalms, like he heard a voice from heaven and God is telling him, write this. Okay? The prophets that we speak about, like Isaiah and Jeremiah and these prophets, yes, they heard, like, they had dialogue with God. Like, that wasn't yes, no. I mean, that was like chapters upon chapters and chapters of dialogue, okay? And things that God is saying. But when it's specific decision-making kind of things like this isn't necessarily like a spoken word that they would hear from God. Could be with the Urim and the Thummim. And that's why earlier on, in other times, David would actually speak to Abishai and say, get the ephod. We want to inquire of God. Why would he say that? Well, because that's how they inquired of God. Yeah. You have a question?
What were those two things you were mentioning?
The Urim and the Thummim.
Are those
No,
metal things?
no, those are the jewels that represent the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? But there is these two things, other things, called the Urim and the Thummim. There's not a lot of information about them in the Bible. But they're mentioned, and that's how God would respond. One of the ways.
So is there indication like they lit up, or I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out like because you say yes or no, is it like?
I don't know. I mean, I want to say that I've heard that, but I can't confirm like exactly how they work. Yeah, it's
revealed.
Okay, so Hebron. Why is God asking him to go to Hebron? So Hebron was a city of refuge. What is a city of refuge?
The people who accidentally killed someone, right? They go there and stay there for a certain amount of time.
Okay, so it was a place of safety. So if somebody's wanting to come and kill David, they're less likely that they're going to kill him if he's in a city of refuge. Okay? Because that's a place where essentially even people who have committed murder accidentally and done other stuff like that could go, and whoever is accusing them can't come and take revenge upon them. Okay, so that could be one reason. Also, it was a priestly city. Okay, it was a city of priests. Remember, what did we say about the cities of the priests? Like, where were they?
All over the place, like in each tribe.
All over the place, because everywhere they needed priests. So that's why the tribe of Levi did not have an inheritance of land. Because if they had an inheritance of land, then that means everyone would have to go to that place to see the priests. The priests had to be scattered around, okay? So there was these cities of the priests scattered around in all the places. So Hebron was one of them. So Abiathar, who was the priest that was with David, he could have influence there, okay? He could help David there, okay? And also it was a large city, okay? It was a large city. So David went up there, and his two wives, also Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. Remember, these are his two wives as of right now, okay? And David brought up the men who were with him, every man with his household, so they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. Then the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah, and they told David, saying, the men of Jabesh-Gilead were the ones who buried Saul. Okay, so what's important about this verse? What did they anoint David to be? King? King of what? Of Judah. Of Judah. Okay, that's just one tribe. So when David starts out as king for the first few years, he is only king of Judah. He's not king of all of Israel yet. Okay, so that's important to remember. Now they said what? They told David saying, the men of Jabesh Gilead were the ones who buried Saul. Who was the men of Jabesh Gilead?
The ones who were faithful to Saul, right?
And why were they faithful to him?
You asked before.
So they were being attacked.
Yeah, and defended.
And yes, so that was one of the great things that Saul had done at the beginning of his reign, is he went and saved these people from foreign attack. And so from that point on, they loved Saul. Okay, and they did everything for Saul. So here, they're the ones who buried Saul. So why are people telling David this? Okay, because David is going to love people that respect Saul, essentially. Anyone who's respecting of Saul, like he's going to honor them. So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, you are blessed of the Lord, for you have shown this kindness to your Lord, to Saul, and have buried him. And now may the Lord show kindness and truth to you. I also will repay you this kindness, because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strengthened and be valiant, for your master Saul is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. Okay, so David is blessing them, and he's now like trying to make this push to expand his reign, right? Because Jabesh Gilead, this is not in Judah. So essentially he's trying to become a national leader. He's saying, okay, I'm anointed king of Judah, but I'm now like I want to have involvement in things outside of Judah. And he's speaking about how let your hands be strengthened, and gives them blessings and like this stuff, because he knows that he's eventually going to be their king as well. But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ish-bosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. Okay, who is Abner, the son of Ner? When did we read about him? So do you remember when the second time that David found Saul in a vulnerable position? When was the first time? Where did he find Saul? In the cave. What was the second time?
In the camp.
In the camp. And Saul was what? Sleeping. And who was sleeping next to him? Abner. Okay, so Abner is the commander of the army, of Saul's army, and David has met him before, okay? Obviously because he was in the palace with him, but that was the last time we heard about Abner. So Abner took Ish-bosheth, the son of Saul. So again, this is not Jonathan. Jonathan had brothers, okay? Ish-bosheth is one of them. Remember, Jonathan is dead now. Jonathan would have been the king, okay, if he was alive. But Jonathan is dead. So as is the common tradition, whenever a king dies, who becomes king after him? It's his son, okay? So what David is doing now is he's taking the throne, and it's rightfully his because God has anointed him to be king, but that's not the normal process. Like, that's not what normally is going to happen. So you're going to start to have like this tension. It's like people that are going to be following Ish-bosheth as being the king and supporting him, and then other people that are going to be supporting David to be the king. Okay, and that's what Abner is doing here. And he made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, over Benjamin, and over all Israel. Okay, so now you have two kings. You have a king that's over Judah, and you have a king that's over every other tribe. Ish-bosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. Only the house of Judah followed David. At the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Okay. One other thing to keep in mind is that Abner was Saul's cousin. Abner was related to Saul. And because Abner's already in the palace, and he already had, like, at this point now that Saul is dead, like, Abner is one of the most powerful people in Israel. because he's with all the connections, even though Ish-bosheth is technically now the king of Israel. But Abner is the one who's like the puppet master. He's the one who controls everything. Ish-bosheth has no experience being the king. Abner has been the commander of the army for Saul all along. He knows everything. He knows all the people. So if Ish-bosheth gets to stay as being the king, now Abner gets to keep all the power. Okay? If David comes and becomes king, like who knows? Like what is he going to do? Is he going to keep Abner? Is he going to pick somebody else? Right? So Abner, it's in Abner's personal interest that Ish-bosheth becomes king. It's not just kind of like, okay, yeah, Ish-bosheth should be king because he's Saul's son. Like he has something personal in it for him. Now Abner, the son of Ner, and the servants of Ish-bosheth, the son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. And Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. So they sat down, one on one side of the pool, and the other on the other side of the pool. Joab, he's eventually going to become the commander of the army for David when he becomes like fully king. Right now, he is like, he's in charge of his men, like the military aspects of David's like entourage, is Joab. So here it's saying Joab and the servants of David, they go out to this pool of Gibeon, and they are sat down on one side. And then Ish-bosheth and Abner and all the other tribes are on the other side. So they're getting ready to have like a battle. So this is becoming a war, like a civil war, between these two groups, Judah and everybody else. Then Abner said to Joab, so these are like their respective commanders in each side. Abner, who was on the side of Israel, and Joab, who was on the side of Judah. Abner said to Joab, let the young men now arise and compete before us. And Joab said, let them arise. Essentially, they're going to have like a battle. So they arose and went over by number 12 from Benjamin, followers of Ish-bosheth, the son of Saul, and 12 from the servants of David. So 12 from the tribe of Benjamin. This is actually the tribe of Saul. 12 men from the tribe of Saul are going to come, and 12 men of the servants of David, his mighty men, are going to come, and they're going to fight each other. And each one grasped his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side, so they fell down together. Therefore that place was called the Field of Sharp Swords, which is in Gibeon. So it's like all 24 of them died. Like each one killed the other, like they all respectively killed each other. So there was a fierce battle that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. So eventually the servants of David beat Abner. Now the three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab and Abishai and Asahel. And Asahel was a fleet of foot as a wild gazelle. So remember, we heard about Abishai, okay? Joab and Abishai and Asahel. This is the first time we hear of Asahel, okay? He runs quickly, okay? So Asahel pursued Abner, and in going he did not turn to the right hand or to the left from following Abner. So he's running after Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, "Are you Asahel?" He answered, "I am." And Abner said to him, "Turn aside to your right hand or to your left, and lay hold on one of the young men and take his armor for yourself." But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. It's like he was running very fast. He didn't want to stop and get armor. He didn't want to do anything. He just kept running after Abner. So Abner said again to Asahel, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I face your brother Joab?" Okay, he's like warning Asahel. It's like, if you come near me, I'm going to have to kill you. However, he refused to turn aside. Therefore Abner struck him in the stomach with the blunt end of the spear, so that the spear came out of his back, and he fell down there and died on the spot. So it was that as many as came to the place where Asahel fell down and died stood still. So it's possible here that Abner didn't really want to kill Asahel, okay? Because he hit him with the blunt end of the spear. If he was really trying to kill him, he would have hit him with the sharp end of the spear. But because Asahel is running so fast trying to attack him, he just kind of, and he like maimed himself. Joab and Abishai, Asahel's two brothers, also pursued Abner. And the sun was going down when they came to the hill of Ammah, which is before Giah, by the road to the wilderness of Gibeon. Now the children of Benjamin gathered together behind Abner and became a unit, and took their stand on top of a hill. Okay, so these Benjamites, the men of Israel, were with Abner, and they became like a formation, and they stood on top of a hill. Then Abner called to Joab and said, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it will be bitter in the latter end? How long will it be then until you tell the people to return from pursuing their brethren?" So essentially, Abner is calling to Joab, wanting a ceasefire, saying, "We want peace. Is this hostility going to last forever? And in the end, what's going to happen? There's just going to be more bloodshed." And Joab said, "As God lives, unless you had spoken, surely then by morning all the people would have given up their pursuing their brethren." So he's saying, like, I would have allowed these people to continue fighting against you until morning, but because you have said these words, I'm going to stop. Like, he's listening to him. So Joab blew a trumpet, and all the people stood still and did not pursue Israel anymore, nor did they fight anymore. Then Abner and his men went on all that night through the plain, crossed over the Jordan, and went through all Bithron, and they came to Mahanaim. So Joab returned from pursuing Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing of David's servants 19 men and Asahel. So they're counting like how many people are missing, how many people fell in battle. And so they had lost 19 men and Asahel, so that's 20 altogether. But the servants of David had struck down of Benjamin and Abner's men 360 men who died. So 360 of Israel died, but only 20 of David died. Then they took up Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb, which was in Bethlehem, and Joab and his men went all night, and they came to Hebron at daybreak. Okay. And glory be to God forever. Amen. Anyone have any questions about that chapter?
About a question. So, I have two questions. The first is, how can you say Jonathan would have been the king if he wasn't dead?
So Jonathan was like he was already like one of the officers of the king, like of his father. And whenever a king dies, who becomes the king after him? It's one of the princes.
Yeah,
and he was the prince. So he would have become the king. Actually, Saul even explicitly told Jonathan, "Why are you helping David? If David dies, then you will become the king. But if David remains alive and he becomes the king, then you will lose the throne." Yeah.
And the second question is, what was the purpose for them? What was the purpose for them for wanting to kill each other?
Purpose of who to kill each other?
When they pierce each other.
The Joab and Abner?
Yes.
Because now there's a war over who's going to be the king of Israel. Right? David is the king of Judah. Okay, but Judah is supposed to be part of Israel, so who's going to be the king? And they know that David is wanting to become the king of the whole nation, and they know that he's been anointed king, but he doesn't really have again, in the normal process, David wouldn't become the king. It would become one of Saul's sons, like Ish-bosheth. So here, like David doesn't really have the right to become the king, except obviously that God anointed him to be king and chose him. But so that's where there's this fight. Actually, every in the book of Kings, especially, every single time you find that a king dies, there's always a push to kill the king's family, because if the king's family dies, someone else can become king. But if there's someone from the king's family that remains alive, then they will become king. So it's always understood that there's like a lineage. King dies, one of his sons becomes king. Yeah.
Every time.
Good. Any other questions? Okay. Let's pray.